Welcome to the Journey Unscripted podcast, where we move beyond surface level conversations and into the truth of what it really means to be human. I am your host, Amanda Andrade, relationship and intimacy coach and a hypnotherapist. And this is a space where we explore the patterns, beliefs, and the emotional dynamics that shape how we live, love, and relate. Here, nothing is scripted, but everything is intentional. We talk about intimacy, relationships, self-awareness, and the unconscious behaviors that quietly run the show, whether we are aware of them or not. Because real transformation doesn't happen by doing more. It happens by becoming more aware of who you are being. So if you are ready to question what you've been taught, expand how you think, and connect on a deeper level, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Because today's conversation isn't just about relationships. It is about the internal frameworks that shape how we experience connection, power, and intimacy. And to explore that, I am joined by Robert Bailey, a retired U.S. Army Special Forces officer, Green Beret, now Executive Director of EDM4V and CEO of Manifest. Robert, I wanted to start it over here. After everything you've been experienced, both in a high stakes environment and in your personal evolution, how has your understanding of intimacy and connection actually changed over time?
Oh, it's changed over time tremendously. When I was 30, I wasn't the same as when I was 20. And then when I was 40, it wasn't the same as 30. You're constantly evolving as an individual. And me as a man, my understanding of relationships, and my role, as a man. When I was younger, you know, I would equate safety because I think, a man's job is to provide safety. And when I was younger, and I would say between teenage years all the way up into, my late 30s, when safety for me was physical. So, you and I are dating, Amanda, and you're like, hey, listen, if a threat presents itself. And I'm like, yeah, of course, I would get between you and that threat. And for me, that was satisfied um, that safety feature. But the reality is, physical safety is just one element. What about your mental safety? What about your emotional safety? What about your spiritual safety? What about your social safety? So, as I evolved in my journey as a man, you start understanding that your role of providing a safe environment for not just the women that you care for or love, but also all the women that you engage with, you understand that safety just goes far beyond the physical. So I guess that's answering that question for you.
Yeah, it does. Actually, it does answer that question because safety, it's just like you mentioned, it's something that from the physical, yes, we need that kind of strength, like physically, right, to protect myself, let's say. And however, when it comes to like to the point of emotionally and spiritual, how do we experience safety? How do we open that space to experience that? And sometimes that's where we can get trapped on that because we are not taught how to feel safe within, how to feel safe in our body, how to feel safe in life. And so does that make a lot of sense. And especially whenever we have our traumas from our childhood that play a role in our life that we could not even imagine how that will impact our functioning on the daily basis. And I'm saying like through the emotional aspect of it. And so, yes, you did answer that. So thank you. And then I have
Well,
the next question.
let's expand on something because you talked about safety and you kind of are talking about defining it, right? How you feel what safe is, but how do you define safe? To me, that sounds like such an abstract concept. It's like, how do I describe the color red to a blind person? I don't know. I think sometimes it's just energy just doesn't lie. And when that energy doesn't lie, what's understood doesn't need to be spoken. I think you understand that, right? We've experienced that personally. So,
Yes.
like when you and I were hanging out with one another, you felt safe with me, just like I felt safe with you. But I couldn't sit here and articulate that. But I know, again, what's understood didn't need to be spoken because that energy didn't lag. If that makes sense.
It does make sense because we are going to be talking about feelings and emotions, which are abstract. So we are human beings, just like I did in the presentation, right? So being, it's a state of mind. How do I feel safe with another person? Just like we are just talking about. How did I feel safe first with you? Because I've been work safety with myself, right? How can I feel safe in a body? And now just to expand a little bit, in my childhood, I had physical abuse. So the way that my grandmother, she was correcting me to be a good woman and to have like instruction in life, that was punishment like physically. She was going to hit me if I did not made it the job that she wanted me to do it, right? So
Yeah.
let's say to broom the house, and then I did not made it because I was doing something else. So she came and then she started hitting me. So that emotion, that physicality, like of feeling safe, I didn't because she was correcting me. Did I knew her that she was correcting me to be a good woman in life? No, I was just a child. Then how did I develop safety throughout life? I have to sit with that feeling of not feeling safe. So then I couldn't reframe that in my subconscious mind. I couldn't just like, "Oh, this is what means to not feel safe physically," because that's what I experienced in my childhood. However, that event, it's gone. Why I don't feel safe anymore? Why I don't trust? Because
Right.
if you don't feel safe, you're not gonna trust.
Right. No, that makes sense.
That's another part too. If I don't trust, how I will feel safe? So it's a dance once and again in order for me to unfold all of those beliefs, as I just did it on the introduction. We're going to talk about the framework. So then that was a physical abuse, and over years with hypnosis and hypnotherapy, I was able to reframe that belief that I can feel safe within my body because was traumatic, right? And then whenever those kind of events happen throughout our life, we are just dissociated. Our consciousness is just dissociated from the body. Yet the body storage 90% of our life because that's the subconscious mind. So it's present in our body. And so over years, I just keep working to build trust, to trust in myself. And there it is just like a path, right? Trust who I am, trusting higher self, trust the universe, trusting God, trusting life. So we touch on that sphere of trust, but it's a fun journey, but at the same time that could be uncomfortable in a way.
So it's interesting you talked about your grandma. So I have a question. Where did you learn your etiquette from?
From
How you
her.
present your Okay. So you think
What kind of education? Let me just expand
no,
that.
so like where did you learn how to present yourself as a woman? Like, because you have a very distinct presentation to you. So was that developed as a child or was that developed later on in your life? So for example, the character traits that I saw, not just your intellect, but you have a very good presentation as a woman. You carry yourself very well. You have a very good posture and you're very poised. That's something that you were either trained with or you developed later. So when you're talking about your grandma, I was just wondering where that came from.
Thank you for your compliments. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
And it's a good question. I think it's just part of who I am, right? And for that, it's just okay. Everything started in my childhood. Yeah, indeed. But in that moment, it was an abuse. I could not have this framework because from what I remember of my grandmother,
Right.
she did not, she was just having a normal clothes. She go to work, stuff like that. But that was that. My mom, in the other hand, before I wanted to change her, That's when I understood that I cannot change nobody, because, and that was my youngest, like 12 years, 13 years old, because I would like to her to present herself like better, like with clothes, stuff like that, to take care of herself
Right.
physically. So then she did not care about it. So then that pissed me off because I wanted to change her. I wanted to control the clothes that she wanted to use. And I was not accepting herself for who she is, right? Because we are not this outside the visual, right? Who
Hmm.
we are, it's more deep, it's internally. If I did not have that internally posture of like how I can be in my feminine, how I can just experience that internally, the external could not present itself. Does that make sense? Or if some woman they are more like on the masculine form, like energetically, because we're talking about energy, they will present themselves not as much as a feminine, like visually, if that makes sense. But also, there is a few women in a form, in a shape that can be more masculine for, but they are very feminine inside. So whenever we are talking about energy and attraction and feeling safe and in presenting yourself, I do believe it's a over time evolving part of your being, right? So nowadays that I am where I am at, just for me it's a art to embrace my full feminine energy and to embrace my masculine energy too, because I did not have their framework from my father, because I was abandoned and rejected. So I did not have a framework of a man in my life. So then I have to become my own father, the own man, because I did not have references, right? So I did have the masculine energy within. It's, I would say it's strong. However, over years, I learned, still learning, because it's a lifetime
Yeah.
process, still learning how to balancing out. So I would say to your question, it's been a journey of like learning here from one person, learning from the other, and everybody came in my journey as an inspiration. So yeah.
So it'd be interesting. I'm sure at some point in all your talks, you talk about how to transition from masculine energy to feminine energy. Because I would find it fascinating because for you, not only were you psychologically in your masculine energy, but like you're a powerful woman. Like you're strong and you're tall. So like you have a presentation that could also be, like feed into that psychology. So I would be interested at some point to talk to you about how you transitioned, but more, or at least balanced it out between the two.
Yeah, I would say it's not. The transition has happened before whenever I was in one polarity more than the
Yeah.
other. So then I was out of balance. And
Yeah.
so whenever I notice that, and then I look for help. So I have a mentor, a coach, and a mentor. So he has helped me to balancing out those polarities in my life. And so nowadays it's accessible for me to switch when I need.
I see that because I've experienced it. I've experienced with you on the Groove Cruise when we would dance together, and then also like when you were just in your zone and you're just like very direct. So I've experienced that. So yeah, that just added validity to what you're saying.
Yeah, so here it is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But yeah, coming back to the question, right? What led you to explore this relationship dynamic? And now we're just like explore and expand more a little bit about like ethical non-monogamy and monogamy dynamics. And to expand that, I'm just inviting all of our listeners and audience, right? So the purpose of this talking, conversation, and dialogue is just for us to expand our framework, because we have like religion saying that we have to be in this way. We have like politics, we have a society and a moral standards that at the end doesn't fit on the dynamic that we as a human beings we choose to experience in life. So just to refresh the question, what led you to explore these relationship dynamics?
I think before you go down that, I answer that question, you kind of got to frame it a little bit. And I think
Yes.
most people think that non-monogamy equal is about like freedom and more options, which I guess on the surface level it is. But in reality, it demands a lot more discipline, a lot more honesty, a lot more emotional control than I think most people are prepared for. And that's why I say it's not for everybody, right? But I'm not here to say, if it's right or wrong. Just want to talk about, like what actually happens when you're in it, and specifically, from my experience. So, what made me explore it? I guess after having a lot of relationships where or like infidelity and cheating and things like that were kind of commonplace, because it just um the acceptance in our society of things. So here, let me back up real quick. So when I accepted it, we'll start there and then I can say how I got into it. So when I accepted it was when there was friction of me having an emotional connection with somebody who was outside of my significant other. And it didn't feel wrong at all. And it was like, well, I love my person, but I also want to explore this. And what do I do with it? And it got caught in one of those situations where it was, okay, do I continue the same behavior before? Well, now I just keep either one or both not in the know while I explore it both. But while I'm doing that, I'm creating all of this negative energy. There's guilt, there's shame, there's all of this stuff. And I'm like, I don't want that, but I don't feel that this is wrong either. And then I had this crazy like epiphany. I was like, well, what if I just tell them both? And yeah, here I tell them both. And then it's like, okay, everybody's let's explore this, and how does that look like? And it's not just on my end, so specifically, with my wife, same thing. She's been able to explore outside relationships, and again, you start hiding things like that because it's taboo. There's all of the frameworks that you had, but one of the things that really helped me along my journey was, and I'm not talking relationship, I'm just talking journey as a whole, was when I took what I already knew from my special operations background and brought that over into my life, because I understand those frameworks. I understood those languages. And it was really, it's a phenomenon for me. A lot of us, we just like hang that person up and we jump back into civilian life. We're like, okay, we're supposed to be this person. It's like, but you're not. Like you were talking about, I remember trying to fit something into a framework that doesn't fit. So it's like, no, that is me. So for example, if I'm looking at something as an operation or a mission and I put that template over it, you remove all the emotion, everything. Yes, you have parameters that you work within, but you want to look at raw data, because raw data means, it could be information that could be turned into intelligence. And if you don't have what you need, now you're talking about like, mission failure and, people getting hurt, people dying. So it's you have to look at things that way. So when I started looking at things from just pure data, the first thing I thought about was in the United States, we have like a 54% divorce rate. So we have a framework that's failing right there as a coin flip. And then if you go on to like the second marriages, it's like something like 65%. So now I'm listening to everybody on the outside who has a framework of failure right off the bat. So do they really know what's best for me? And when I first started my journey, it started when I was trying to heal myself physically. And when I stopped listening to the conventional wisdom of pharmaceuticals and traditional medicine, started just going back to holistic way of living, I started having a lot more effects. So I was like, why again am I going to listen to this conventional wisdom who has a concept of failure anyway? So it's like, okay, well, let me govern myself, and I'll figure some things out. Now, there were some issues, right? You have some concerns, because then now you have in my situation, especially like if you're allowing your wife to explore another relationship, there's men in your circle who are going to look at you like you're being emasculated or something like that, right? Because you have to define masculinity. But I find really interesting because our society can't define masculinity anyway, right? So, but the two groups of men that I would either get the individual who's like the like machismo, like bravado individual. Like I can never allow that. but it's the same dude who has this line of broken relationships, 2 sets of kids everywhere. I'm like, does he really know what the hell he's talking about? Or I'd get the one who stood on this like religious aspect, and one of them was a close friend. He was just like flabbergasted about it, and he's like feeling pity for me. And I was like, I feel pity for you. I'm like, bro, you've been married to the same woman for like 15 or 20 years, and you have no idea what her sexual proclivities are. Like, you don't know her at all. So for me, it's like either one, she's not fully being able to experience her human experience, right? The only one that she gets. Two, she's, secretly resenting you. Or three, you're like, man, I wonder why my wife spends a lot of time at the gym all the time. Well, she's probably getting railed by her instructor. I don't know. There was this all these things that the more I started thinking about it, I was like, the more and more it doesn't make sense not to explore it. So then you go, okay, well, what does that look like? And it's like, well, if you have kids or you have siblings and you have, multiple, do you love one any less than the other? And it's like, no, I really don't. Maybe love one more. I The love is never feels better. It just feels different. And as an individual, I think it's absolutely impossible for you to meet the checklist of what somebody wants. You're always deficient in the area. Now, I think on the monogamy side of things, it absolutely can work, right? There's numerous examples, but that's usually when there's just an equal understanding of things. That makes
Thank you for that. I'd like to ask you, whenever you are talking about we are deficient in one thing, right?
Yeah.
How to work that through. First question, how to work that through, right? Whenever I'm identifying the deficiency within, and as you like to put it in that word. But also the other question that I would like to ask you, it's how do you navigate feelings like jealousy, insecurity, or comparison? Because that can be tied with that deficiency. Please expand on that.
I'm gonna take over. I'm gonna take over your show, Amanda. So you got all these questions, but I'm just not gonna let you go. Right? That's why you and I we had the dance, right? And so we'll get to your questions, but we're gonna talk more. So let's talk about that from an experience. What does the deficiency look like, right? So you have to frame it, and I give a real world example. The level of conversations that you and I had, that is something that I have deficient in my relationship. And it's not because my wife doesn't have the capacity to it. It's because she doesn't have the patience for it. And I respect her for that because that's her truth. Like, I give you an example. We were at a festival one time and I like to go in the back and we had some conversations of some just wild things that I love when my mind goes to other places and you have the ability to talk about those things like that. But yeah, so that deficiency was just being able to have somebody to have that conversation with at that level. When I went back and shared that with my wife, she knew how excited I was about that. And then she was like, yeah, you can absolutely, have conversation. Go enjoy that because that's something that you don't get all the time. And I see how happy that you are. So yeah, absolutely. Go enjoy your conversation.
Thank you for that. But I'm still looking for like how, let's say me, if I find that I have a deficiency, as you like to put that out, right? So let me give you an example, and then that's going to be, but I would not say that is a deficiency on it. So I am not American by birth. So a few things in the culture, right, I cannot understand because I was not growing up in here. And so because of that, that will be hard or difficult to connect some aspects of the culture, right? So then I would not say that would be a deficiency in my relationship with like a partner that is from here. So then how can I address that in my relationship? So it's more in that regard. It's a simple thing, but everything that is simple that can be escalated, right? So the same way that I've been experienced that in a previous relationships with American, there was that kind of barrier of like not understanding where you came from because you did not experience that. So how to work that through in that relationship. And that can be monogamy, that can be non-monogamy, how you see that way.
I think you talked about it earlier. The first thing is you have to know yourself, right? You have to know what yourself, you have to know your truth, know what you're compatible with and what you're not compatible with, because then that allows you to make better decisions on who you choose to engage with, right? If you don't know yourself, then there's a potential that you can attract somebody who you would have been able to tell that they're not compatible and waste their time. I think that's terrible. So once you get an understanding of yourself, then you can be more open with the individuals that you engage with, and specifically your partners. Where that becomes difficult is when there's growth that happens and you potentially grow apart a little bit. And now this person's over here and this person's here, and now you're exposing a truth. And then maybe that person goes, well, now I'm no longer okay with that. So what do you do with that? That's something that everybody has to answer if they ever have to cross that bridge, because you're left with two things. Do I compromise and give something up? Somebody's giving up something. That's their truth. Are you willing to live with that? And then the next thing is, or do you just, grow in different paths? I think a healthier solution would be to grow in different paths. That makes sense rationally. However, when you have emotional attachment to it, it's a completely different story. That's the analytical brain, fighting with the logical brain. Now you're in conflict with, your logic and your emotions, your heart. So I don't know. I
And
think,
and thank you for that. On that regard, I can totally talk from a place of experience in my last relationship, which we were growing apart. And whenever the compatibility was awesome, we met and we start to get to know each other. You were talking about it. Do I know my limitations? Yes, I do know as much as I do who I am. So if I'm doing the inner work, meaning like just being introspective, seeing what is my limitations, my belief systems, because every relationship will trigger the parts of you that you have not seen yet. Because relationship, either they can be a growth relationship or they're going to be in a comfort relationship. And then in that moment, it's stagnant. You don't grow. And as a human beings, we are evolving all day long, every day. And
yeah,
so in that moment, because for me, it's a commitment to work on myself as I can consider myself a seeker. So then I will always seek for that improvement because it's that bring me center, that bring me more serving to others, right? Because I'm serving myself. So then got to the point on that relationship that we are not compatible anymore. But just like you, I start question myself, and I was in a monogamy relationship. And then in that moment, I start question myself. Am I doing things right? It's something, it's about me. Am I being too rude? I'm being too straight? Do I feel safe in this relationship? So I start question myself and then trying over and over and talking about it and expressing my feelings to the point that I was not happy anymore in that relationship. He is a fantastic person. He has values. We had the not the same lifestyle, but we have so much commonality, practice like yoga and everything. So to a certain point. So in that moment, I have to let it go because I was not feeling happy. And if I am not happy, if I am not satisfied, if I am not feeling fulfilled, I cannot share that with my partner. So then that's when I realized in that moment what was love. Let others voluntarily evolve. Whenever that hit my consciousness in my heart, I was able to detach. However, was the most uncomfortable feelings that I ever experienced because I was choosing myself because I cannot change him. I cannot, and even I was sharing a lot of things with him, right? This and that. So we were growing apart. So I was speaking a different language with him. So he was speaking a different language with me too. So then I went through in this processing over 2 years that I was processing that I was feeling insecure in that relationship because our polarity as a yin and yang, right? Masculine and a feminine energy. Like I say, I have that embodiment, the masculine, very, very natural for me. So then I am the action person. I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna plan in all of this, and especially come from another culture, living in the United States now over 14 years, you be so resilient. And your brain shift. You gotta talk in English, you gotta learn, you gotta adjust to the receiver to understand your message. So communication also it's another thing. Then whenever I was just like realizing that I was not feeling safe because he did not work through his own traumas from his masculine in his past. And then because he did not work that, he was not ready to work that, I could not feel safe. And like you say, the man is the provider. The man is the safe person that the man is who hold this space for that, right? But we all have masculine and feminine
Yeah.
energy with them. So then I understood that intellectually that I was not feeling safe with myself, how I could not feel safe with how I could feel safe with him. That's when everything shifted. I was like, I need to work safety with it. And to work safety with it, I need to switch for my feminine energy because all of the emotional patterns comes from the feminine wisdom. And that's when I understood that I was out of balance. We came along together to balancing out the polarities. But after
Hmm.
a while, if that friction, as you like to call, was not having a flow, things will go apart, things will disappear. So then that's what happened, and I can understand. So I do believe, Rob, it's more about like how do we choose to work through our insecurities, to work through and whenever you say like deficiencies, right?
Hmm.
Would say for me, it's part of ourselves, it's part of my being that I am not aware that I need to give some attention regarding to what happened to me in my past, in my childhood, because everything comes from the childhood.
Yeah.
So that was working through abandonment, rejection from my father. So it's really impressive how things work in a dance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think one thing also to understand is, structure doesn't determine relationship success, in my opinion. It's the people and the understanding and the agreements between them that determine the success.
totally. And I agree with you. Totally. Can you let's expand that, right? So for me, I'm very outgoing person. I like to connect. I like to talk. I like to
To
learn from people.
everybody, to everybody, to everybody.
To everybody, yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Uh, yeah.
Even with
Yes.
the plants. I talk with the
I
plants.
know. I know. Amanda, if you're walking somewhere and there's a crowd of people, say there's a 30-minute, I already know 29 of those minutes are going to be sitting talking to people.
It's part of who I am. So
Yeah.
then if my partner is not comfortable with that freedom, right? Or if my partner is not comfortable with who I am, the relationship will not work because he's going to think that, oh, you're giving so much attention for somebody else, so you're not giving attention for me. And so it's that kind of like openness and acceptance. Okay, I accept you the way that you are. So that's why I'm talking about limitations, right? So
Yeah.
as one,
You accept people the way they are, but then you also have to set some framework to that, right? Otherwise, it's just like, all over the place. So what am I willing to participate in, and what am I not? What am I comfortable with? What am I not? And then you have to come to a compromise, right? And if you come to something that you can't compromise on, then you know my, the way I always respond to it is like, I'm not telling you to do anything, right? But there's a price to be with me, right? I'll give you an example. Like I remember one time friend of my wife's was like, she doesn't have to listen to you. That's what she said. And I thought about it for a minute and I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. She doesn't have to. But you know what? She can also open her car door then by herself. She can also find a way to pay her G payment. There's a lot of things that she can do, but there's a price to be with me. And in that specific situation, there was just a minor infraction of respect, and it wasn't real. It was perceived. So that kind of goes into also having the conversations. I know earlier you mentioned, I think you used the term jealousy or something like. How do you navigate those emotions, right? Because you're a
Jealousy,
human
we're
being.
doing comparison.
Yeah, you're gonna have feelings like that, like you're a human. But then I also learned something again through my growth, but my rebuilding phase of myself without going into my story is, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a minute. Talking about navigating feelings, understanding that you feel your feelings, you're not your feelings. So that kind of helped me do what you're talking about, be able to detach from how I'm feeling and having an understanding and then changing the way I talk to myself. So from saying something like, "Hey, I'm depressed." Well, no, I'm not depressed. That's not my normal state of being. I feel depressed. And just those different shifting of words helping you understand. But the key to it, from my experience, is if I feel a certain way. So say, Amanda, you and I are in a relationship and you're getting really friendly with somebody, and I'm feeling jealous about it. It is my responsibility as that individual to come to you and say, "Hey, as my partner, my friend, my confidant, the person I feel safe with, hey, I'm feeling this way. Like I'm feeling whatever," and have the ability to talk about it. Because one of the things I've come to learn, um, is that we make assumptions, and that's not fair. You're making an assumption, like perceive something some way, it invokes a feeling, and then when I go and talk to my partner about it, come to find out I misunderstood what actually transpired. So that feeling wasn't real, if that makes sense. It was how I was reacting to that perceived whatever it is. So I think as soon as you feel some kind of way, you need to address it immediately so you can better understand and communicate it, right? Because sometimes in your head, you may have an idea that something might be amazing, and then you see it and then it's like, wow, this is not great at all. So perfect example from two different cultures. I have a lot of friends from the Gulf, specifically Bahrain. I have some friends I'm really, really close with. One of my friends was talking about some of the issues with having plural marriages, which is acceptable, right? You can have multiple wives there. And I asked him if he would ever have multiple wives because it was within his right. And he said, "I never will." And I asked him why. And he said, "Because my mom was the oldest one. And then, my father continues the wives just was younger or prettier or whatever it was." And he was like, "No matter what, my mom would never accept that." And I didn't want to, uh, go around with having that burden or doing that, with my wife. So it's just again, right? It's all about framework, what you're willing to accept, and then have those conversations so that way you can come to either an understanding or a separation or whatever. But it's not fair to either one of you to withhold that information.
Yes, I like to touch on the point that you say like framework, and it's very important to have a framework. So this way it's a guidance on that
Hmm.
journey. Another thing is communication, but we're going to touching on communication. How can I able to communicate something that I don't even know who I am? That's another thing that always touch, and that it is in any type of relationship, right? That could be romantic, that can be in a friendship as we have, that can be like leadership, that can be anything, because we just know each other throughout life if we communicate, but first communicating with ourselves. So the framework came from like the beliefs that we have. Let's say, so in my childhood, my father, he abandoned and rejected my mom, right? So that was a framework that I had it, right? So then how to work that through in a current relationships, I need to develop that framework. And the development of that framework before I go to any relationship, it's going to be about my values and principles. And the reason that your friend from Iran, he doesn't want to have multiple wives because he has values and principles. So in my perspective, and I can be wrong, right? My framework for any relationship will come from my values. What do I allow myself to do it? What do I not allow myself to do it? Could I do this with somebody else? Am I comfortable with them doing that with me? Right?
So how do you communicate those values then? How would you communicate those values?
Just see it. First, that communication comes from like a very uncomfortable point.
I,
It's
I think
very
how you it's easier than that. Don't overcomplicate. It's because that's how I was. It's really just communicating your expectations and then having expectation management on the back end. So I'll give you an example, right? Non-monogamy means different things to everybody, right? There's like this whole spectrum of different people out there. There's some people who are just, couples who engage with others just for the physical engagement of sex, or adding some sort of, kink or something to their relationship. But there's a danger in that with people, what they don't understand, right? Expectation management is understanding anytime you're injecting another human being, we're complicated creatures, right? So say you have this hard boundary of like, there's going to be no emotional attachment, right? And that's my hard no. But that's not a realistic no. And the reason being is you don't know how that person's going to connect with that other person. And guess what? You facilitated, you encouraged it, and now that's happening. You sharing that responsibility. So now is it because you feel uncomfortable because you didn't have expectation management? Now you got to cut that relationship off with that other person. I don't think that's right. But those expectations that are communicated have to also be realistic in nature. If that makes sense.
it does make sense, but once and again, expectation can be like projecting. Because the thing is, we are all projecting all the time based in our past. Because like I say, the subconscious mind holds 90% of our memories, traumas, values, principles, intuition. So basically, we are communicated from that space that we are not even aware. And also, it is the expectation from that. So then I have unconscious expectation, and also I have a conscious expectation, just like saying, oh, I'm going to have this interaction physically with another couple, and then it's going to bring me their adventure, their desire, right? However, in that interaction, that can trigger something that you are not expecting at all,
All right. Yeah.
but it's necessary for whatever that person is moving through in her or his personal growth. And then for me, it's everything is spiritual.
Mhm.
Everything, because we are spiritual beings living a human experience. It's not the opposite. It's not human living a spiritual experience. So then there will touch in values that I cannot have expectation because the spirituality matter, right? So then comes to the point of like my ego in that interaction. So then the ego will take the place because there can be many reasons. And I'm just putting some, right? As just having some that can be lust, just like the your friend that you mentioned. He has many wives. And then this is nice because we seek unconsciously and sometimes consciously for validation.
So when you say nice, I always laugh about it because I always have this joke, right? Every man wants two women until he has two women. Like you said, yeah, might be nice. Like you can portray something. Imagine if you had two women who are upset at you at the same time. Think about as a man, you have one. You know what I mean? Like again, like that's what I always say, right? Everybody wants that until you have to deal with things like that. Then it's not that great.
But yeah, and I can understand, but also it's once and again that's the lust that can be, that is the ego, right? Because we are seeking for validation, external validation. Oh, because the guy, and then there comes the judgment. Oh, you have two women with you, and then guys, Rob, you're the guy. What are you doing? Because in they had you're just like
Yeah,
around
yeah,
and then
yeah.
having two different women and then to have that because in a man perspective it's one thing, right? But here's the thing, every man is different. I feel men it's seeking for that physical
Mhm.
fulfillment. Other
Or the
ones are
validation, like you just talked about, social
for the
validation.
for the masculinity. and for the approval to be, it's many things. It's a field from that we cannot even touch on each reason that everyone is in there for it. But what I found beauty on this kind of dialogue, and just to share with like our audience, is just to expand your way of thinking. I'm not telling you, hey, go and just be monogam and or just not be monogam. No, at all. I'm not incentivizing anybody. I'm just in here to open that space because this is a taboo topic. People don't talking about it, but they experience things. And then okay, so then you judge one person.
So let's talk about not talking about it, because that's one of the things that allowed me to embrace going into that space. Is the culture here doesn't talk about the connections with others, but they're accepting of the husband who bangs his secretary after work, or the wife who sleeps with her personal trainer. Like, that's acceptable here. Acceptable in the fact that we don't talk about it, but we all know that's underneath. So if that's already out there I mean, that's, infidel. And I don't think it's the infidelity that caused the breach. Unless that's one of your principles, it's the loss of trust and betrayal, which does what? Erodes your safety. And what does your safety do? At your core instinct as a human being is survival. And what is that survival? Is that person reliable? That's the core. What it erodes is now this person is not reliable. So is it really the infidelity, or is it that breach of trust? Let your audience make that decision on their own.
Yeah, totally. And then that's why we're having those dialogue, because this way we can expand, because everything comes to at the end, in my perspective, we're all seeking and we're all looking for love, right? But, and once and again, I can be wrong. We are seeking for external love, how that person can love me, how that person can validate it myself, how that person can ensure myself. It's not the way. The way it's find love with them, and once I find love with it, I'm able to extend that love. I'm able to share that love. And one thing that is just people say that on autopilot, right? But they it's like, okay, I'm looking for my another half.
Yeah.
Okay, you're looking to, are you saying that you are broken? And then you need
Yeah.
to have your another half for you to be complete and now having a relationship? Guess what? That will not
Yeah.
work, because if you're not feeling a whole, you're not gonna find another person that is feeling a whole too. You gotta feel a whole for you to interact with another person that is also
Yeah.
feeling whole.
Correct.
Because
So
if you're feeling like a half or incomplete, you're going to find somebody that is also feeling incomplete, and you guys not gonna just complement on each other
correct.
path, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I can use an example if you don't mind talking about your and my friendship.
Mhm. Uh, Go ahead.
No, because go ahead. Go ahead. Uh, no, go
Go
ahead.
with
I'll let no,
limitations.
no,
This is funny.
no. I know you're saying two people becoming whole, right? Like two
Uh-huh.
whole people meeting each other, right? So when we were on group cruise, I was ready to go. I was heading to dinner, right? And before meeting you, I was very centered with myself, probably the most stable. And how I define stability is physically fit, mentally sound, emotionally grounded, spiritually aware, and socially conscious. Like, I probably was at my peak. So when you and I interacted, it wasn't like I didn't need validation. I wasn't seeking anything. And neither were you. And that engagement that we had was absolutely genuine and authentic, and was awesome, right? And I ended up being late to go to my dinner, and I literally ate my dinner, and I was like, hey, I want to go find Amanda. And that was, one of the first times I ever told my significant other, and it was received very well. I said, hey, I've given you, the past, whatever, 8 years of nonstop just attention. I said, I'm choosing myself this time. She was like, okay. Like, there was a mutual respect and like a love there, and so it allowed me to have a great experience. Like, I had a great experience with you on a group cruise, to the point that it was so impactful that we're sitting here having conversations about things like this because it expanded our understanding, right? And again, you don't know who you're going to connect with and how you're going to connect with them. So the expectation, because my wife and I already have an understanding that you don't know how you're going to connect with somebody. So then it has to, going back to the over communication and the comprehension, right, of understanding, and then checking back in with that individual and ensuring that sometimes you can address concerns before they become issues. So I can address something that may be misconstrued or maybe felt as jealousy by reassurance or things like that. Uh, but yeah, I miss our conversations, Amanda. We have really good conversations. And
We
again,
do.
and what I appreciate is we come from a place of understanding, but multiple times you and I have injected new truths that we had to step back and be like, okay, I got to accept that, or at least consider it now. So I appreciate that, because it's very rare that you get to have conversations with somebody and you're like, yep, yep, rational, yep, yep. No, I don't agree with you, and this is why. And it's just the way that we've always been able to do that. I always appreciate that. So, and I appreciate for you having these types of conversations in the show. It's awesome.
Yes, yes, thank you. I really open for that because their kind of interaction for the first time in my life expand my framework. Huge, huge.
Yeah. The
Because
shock.
first,
I remember your face. We were talking, and you literally like stop. And it's funny you say that, because I remember when we were dancing a few times, I would talk too much, and you're just like. But you gave me that same shush, and you said, are you married, or do you have a girlfriend? And I said yes. I said yes, and you went, because you are definitely somebody that I would like to explore. And I was
I'm
like,
interested on it. I
okay.
remember
Yeah,
the word.
something along those lines. And I just was like, well, I have the ability to explore if you're okay with that. And I remember you were just like, this is this is so weird. And Amanda does weird stuff, and you're like, yeah, this is my kind of weird. This is Groove Cruise. It's not real. Everyone's dressed up. Like, it's the perfect environment, in my opinion, to explore something like that, if that was someone's intent. Because in that arena, why I found the EDM theme so sacred and so amazing was because of the openness. That was one of the things that led to my journey and allowed me to start, EDM for me, electronic dance music for vets, because that environment, everybody was so accepting. Not only was everyone so accepting, nobody gave a shit who you were or who you used to be. It's like, coming from a place where I was used to always be so worried about the past, and then so worried about the future. And like, in those environments, I just felt grounded and like in the present, because everyone was there. It's like, that person right there could be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company next to somebody who's unemployed at the moment. You know what I mean? And they all come together under that one unifying principle, philosophy, code of ethics, a plur, right? Peace, love, unity, and respect. Which another time we could talk about, I used to think was the biggest bunch of hippie BS when I first started. Now it's, an amazing, it provides an amazing environment. And, you've experienced that because it's something
Yeah,
you and I share.
totally. Yeah, it's just no judgment at all. That doesn't have judgment because people are there for the love of the music. People are to a place to celebrate life dancing.
Correct. So I'll give you an example. If you were at a rave and you saw a guy holding hands with two girls, or a girl holding hands with two guy or one guy, we wouldn't think anything of it. It's just kind of like that environment, you
Yeah.
know? But if you've seen another perfect example how the different crowd is, we were leaving a festival in downtown St. Pete, and we were getting into like where the normal people meet the rave culture. And so I was going to go see another buddy of mine who was playing, and he's playing at a local club. So I was like, I'm trying to get there. But I had two Liquid Death water, the canned water that you get at the festival. So they'll let you leave with water. You can't leave with alcohol. So the bouncer at the door is like, hey, you can't bring this in. And so there's like a group next to me, and I was like, hey, my buddy's playing a set here. And I was like, you guys want these? And it was two waters. And they looked at me like, ew, we don't want to touch that. And I started laughing. because, in the rave culture, it's so normal to like just give gifts or exchange. And I was like, man, if I was at a rave or with my rave fam and I handed two people two liquid deaths, I would have got hugs from six people. I would have got like Sprout. I would have got a lollipop. I would have got all kind of stuff. It's just um, that environment just allows it provides that energy for, in my opinion, to explore things like that we got to explore on Groove Cruise.
Totally. But I also can agree that even being there, I can see some friends that doesn't have that openness
Yeah,
to these kind of like
yeah, we
connection,
we experience.
this kind of experience. So I would say that it's just like it's not everybody that's open for it, and it's okay.
Amanda,
You
I love watching you break character because you're very poised and you're very professional, and so it's great to see. I'm breaking character a little bit. I'm just teasing you
no,
a little bit.
no, I'm just saying that it's people that they don't they are not open for that,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Remember your friend
okay.
that we at the casino when my wife came up and then she was like, "What the hell's going on?" And I told her, and she was just like, she sat there for a long time with her eyes wide open, and then you know what her rationale was. This is everybody's rationale. You want to hear what it is? Because multiple people said it.
Huh?
They said
Please.
they just said, looked at me and they go, "You know what? Amanda's gonna do what Amanda wants to do," and it was so matter of fact. So it was like, you know what? Whether I really don't care because Amanda's going to do what Amanda's got to do. And that's pretty, and that is a little bit of a part of you, how you are, right? That's the spirit of Brazil that's in you. And a little bit of like the masculine side of you. Like, you're very adventurous. You're like, you're going to do it. You're like, I'm going to go do it.
Yeah.
So
I'm about to experience life, right?
yeah.
So as long as I respect myself and my values,
Mhm.
and because I have them and I extend that for others, it's okay. I experience life. If I don't judge myself for things that I'm doing, if you judging me, not my problem. That's your
Yeah.
problem. That's not me that are limited. And all good. As long as you respect me, all good. I will enjoy life. Why not? you know? So,
Well, again, that's funny. Go back to the acronym PLUR. The last letter in there's R is respect. That's a big one.
yeah, totally. To the next question, because the subject it's being very
Uh,
nice and I love this. So, how does true intimacy mean to you today versus before, Rob?
True intimacy.
Hmm.
I guess you have the framework too of like what you think intimacy is, right? And I think intimacy changes as you grow older, like right. So when I was younger, especially like when I was in the military, I came from an environment there wasn't a lot of good feminine energy. And then you go into a hyper masculine environment, and then the first woman that shows you any towards of nurturing, compassion, love, like getting a meal cooked and getting clothes done, like things that are kind of foreign to you. It's easy to attach yourself to people that aren't the right fit for you. So I think through some of those experiences, you start to learn about yourself. To be honest, at the end of the day, it's not about monogamy or non-monogamy. Like I wouldn't say I promote either one. I just keep I would say my opinion to myself, and it's not a matter of scapegoating. I think people need to explore things on their own without having the biases of others injected to it. And I think along that journey, you're going to discover what is right for you and what's wrong with you. And to your point, which I think is amazing, is when you get to a point of not judging yourself. And for me, that was a huge turning point for me when it came to forgiveness, because forgiving others was much easier. But like, how do you forgive yourself? Like, holy shit, that's deep. But I found that forgiving yourself starts with you not holding yourself accountable to the same standards that you have today. So, for example, maybe I was, in non-monogamy. Maybe today I'm like, I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to hold the past me, to the same standard. Or if I was vice versa, right? Go from monogamy to non-monogamy. Like you were making decisions based upon information that you had, based upon experiences you had, and sometimes those experiences change, and sometimes those experiences change how you view, right? So one of the things I think we talked about earlier on, you're talking about like dividing love. Well, maybe get to a point where you're like, I don't want to do that. I just want somebody who's my whole and entire focus. So at the end of the day, it's really not about monogamy or non-monogamy. I think more importantly, we should focus on, things like honesty, things like accountability, things like mutual respect, and at the end of the day, love, right? I think you said it beautifully, because I've heard that before too, right? Letting others evolve, but say
That's
letting others voluntarily evolve, right? So
That's the
sometimes
meaning of
that's
love. If you get
yeah,
the love letters, right?
yeah,
Love. For me, that was the representation in still. It let others voluntarily evolve. And that
yeah.
is the hardest part thing because
It is.
it's not being attached. Because the
Right.
thing is, we attach to one and another, right?
Yeah.
On the daily basis and we don't have freedom once we are attached to that because once and again there comes an expectation, unconscious expectations that comes projecting, that comes deflecting because that being has not worked through the limitations, the framework. And so I would say I agree with you. It's not about being monogamy and not monogamy. It's about like a growth relationship in a
Yeah.
comfort zone, let's say,
Yeah.
because we are talking
It's
about
not always negative. It's not always negative, Amanda. Sometimes I've seen people who both explored non-monogamy, and it was like, okay, that's not for them. They had friction points, and they came back, and they were stronger than they were before because they don't have that yearning for what else is out there. They're like, I've been out there. My person's the most amazing person I had, and I had to go experience that in order for me to understand that that's what I had. I'm not saying that's the way for everybody, but I've seen it work that way too. I think there's a lot of focus on like the negative aspects of things like that. I think if you operate within the framework that we talked about, or the principles, right? Honesty, love, communication, respect, love. At the end of the day, I think you're gonna. That's how you navigate any situation or any whether it's the relationship or anything when it comes to two imperfect human beings trying to not just cohabitate but be compatible and then grow as individuals and as the couple. And I think sometimes you just have to sit down and go, are we still compatible? Are we still, you know, have the same ideas? So, like for example, I met my wife when she was 23, turning 24. Well, she's 33 now. 23-year-old her is not 33-year-old her. So there's some things that she was okay with, or things that she was like everything in life that is completely different now. So then you have to, when you get to those crossroads, then make the determination. What are you willing to compromise on and what you're not willing to compromise on? And then from there, you may potentially have to make some tough decisions. What I've learned from sitting on decisions and being indecisive, which is something that has plagued me for a long time, just being so analytical, is when you do that, you are trading short-term pain for long-term joy. So if you just got it out of the way immediately, you're going to be on the backside. It's going to be better on the backside versus not doing it, and now you're just like it's like this dull, aching pain in your leg that you never go get fixed. So the sooner that you address things, and that's not even talking about relationships. That's just any friction, right? It could be, I don't know, I have a gambling problem or something, right? Something like that's not going to get better. So it translates over into other areas of life, but I would have never have experienced that unless I went down this route of relationships and understanding also like just my role, right? So for example, there's a lot of men who said they want to lead, right? It's like, lead, follow me over here. Well, guess what leading also looks like? Also looks like, hey, Amanda, I'm feeling some kind of way and I want to address something that's really uncomfortable. That's also leading. That was something that I had to learn as well, because again, in my mind, that was associated with like being soft or being feminine. It's like, no, masculinity for me has changed in the fact that understanding that there is a balance, right? I can be absolutely aggressive and I can be absolutely gentle in the same breath. They're not mutually exclusive.
that's
So
the
in that same,
dance.
right, yeah, yeah, we said it all the time, right? The dance, right?
The
So
internal dance. Yeah,
yeah,
between
absolutely.
it's the internal dance. And I like what you just share, because like what is just the question that I did it right, what does true intimacy means to you? And I'm gonna just put my perspective on that. True intimacy will show up in every area of your life. because true intimacy is the way that you related to yourself.
Mhm.
It's the way that you have the relationship with yourself. And so, but people are aware, some people they are not. And like I say, we have both the yin and yang inside with us, the masculine and the feminine energy. How do I allow myself to interact with that energy? How do I allow myself to get to know myself, like having self awareness, self discovering? Like,
Mhm.
how do I interact with this situation, right? You were saying gambling, like, and addictions and controlling and let's say other aspects of it, and just like eating disorder, right? I had it in the past, eating a challenge with eating disorder, because that
Mhm.
was the way that I was coping my uncomfortable feelings. That was the way that I was suppressing anger and control, because in order for me to feel safe in my environment in the past as a child, I need to control. So then I feel safe, but I cannot control people. People are not controllable. I cannot
Mhm.
control situations. So that was the illusion of my mind. And whenever you say like, oh, being analytical, I was so much on my mind, so much. And so, oh, if I control this, that will happen. If I to feel safe. So got to the point in my life that I choose to have that dance within and to experience truth intimacy, because I was afraid of losing control. That was the most paradoxical experience of my life. And just to expand on that, I had physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. So in that event in my life, I need to control to feel safe, right? That was what my inner child has, and as a mechanism of coping. So then nowadays it doesn't work anymore. So then I start to loosening up my grips and loosening it up. So then I couldn't experience the truth connection within. I couldn't trust in myself. I couldn't just be with myself. But once and again, it's uncomfortable to work those emotions because
Yeah.
they are not truth. But because we are so engaged, and then I typically I say that to clients or people that I'm coaching, we could be mind identifying. So instead of like using our mind as a tool to navigate a life, we are mind identifying. And that is a controlling part, because it's not allowing us to drop it in the heart. It's allowing us to be so analytical and detached that I could not connect with people.
Mhm.
I was connecting with people on the surface level. So that's why in the introduction I made it sure to put it there, to connect on the surface level, because that's how I was it. I
Yeah.
was very nice in the same way, but nowadays I choose to connect deeply because I've been found that safety with. And
I think
then that,
that's where you and I that's how you and I connected, because we talked about very real stuff right from the get-go. I mean, our interaction was real from the get-go, right? It's like, yeah, I wanna explore and enjoy you, but, hey, my wife's also here on this boat. Are you okay with that? That's I mean, right off the bat, it's like that, you know?
yeah, totally. It's just about allowing yourself to expand, allow yours and to honor the consequence, because that's the most important thing. So honoring your consequences is the most important thing.
One of the things, like you were talking about the processing emotions and the analytical versus the logical side, or the logical side versus the abstract side. And for me, really big, I mean, for my process was psilocybin and music. I learned how to process not just emotions, but I went from feeling like very little to feeling my emotions to feeling other people's emotions around me, and that was really, really overwhelming. But the thing that was the most helpful was being able to take something abstract like a feeling or a situation, and then being able to take that abstract thought and bring it over to the analytical side and make it a logical understanding, brief, so to speak, that can be articulated. Yeah, I just throw that out there because I would have never come to that conclusion just on my own to have those understandings of even being able to break free of the constructs of everything that I come with from my childhood to my upbringing to religious beliefs, right? To be honest with you, the first time that when I was at a festival and I had a big mushroom dose, that was when I literally broke of all those things and started looking at things from a very human perspective. So, for example, when I first went to the events, I remember my wife saying, I wanted to introduce me to somebody, and he was a veteran. And the guy was like a fueler or something, which is no issue. But my state of mind back then was like, that dude was a fueler. I was a special operator. We have nothing in common. I was like, no one's going to understand me and no one's going to relate to me. And what that happened was it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that I manifested because guess what happened? No one understood me and no one related to me because that was the energy that I put off. And something very interesting happened, which I believe was absolutely divine, right? There are things that happened in my life. I look back and there's no way that was by happen chance. And so, and what ended up happening, I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a veteran about the loss of purpose and identity. And there was this lady next to me, probably like 10 years older than me, was like ear hustling my conversation. And she was like, oh my goodness, that totally related with me. And I was like, I was telling like this war type example and it related to this lady. So I was like, why is that? And she was a recent empty nester and a divorcee. So a loss of identity and a loss of purpose. And that was at that moment in time when I realized that, you know, we may all have different experiences, but we have one experience that's a human experience, you know? So if I had said, what is pain feel like, love, joy, there's a reference point, and that allowed me to connect with a lot more people. Because of that, it also allowed me to expand what I felt the definition of love was. Like when we were on, you introduced me to your buddy Steve, the painter, that he's like overly flamboyantly gay, and we were having a really good conversation. And I remember I was like, "Hey, Steve," and we had a hug, and we did this stuff, and he was like, "Rob, I would never think that a guy like you that would have the masculinity that you project would be compatible with somebody like me." And I'm like, somebody like you, like what? And he's like, I'm gay, I'm flamboyant. And I said, where I understood my masculinity and where it fits in that dynamic is my tribe has just changed. I'm still the same protector that I used to be. And as a protector, it's my job to get between that threat and whatever my tribe is. And I'm like, Steve, this is my tribe. The EDM scene is my tribe. It's not I condone your behavior or support whatever it is. It's like, no, you're a dude in my tribe that I care about, that I love, and I'm going to protect that because what I found specifically in that scene, what makes it so sacred is the ability for you to go and find yourself or rediscover yourself or explore or have, kind of an experience that you and I shared. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered your question.
It did. It's just about the truth, intimacy. In a way, you're just getting your experiences and you just like expanding through what you've been experiencing with others. And I have
Expanding of love,
that's what it's about, right?
right?
But in the end, it's just like how you are bringing those experiences through yourself as like self love. It's one. The other
Yeah.
question that I have for you, it's where do you feel most connected emotionally, physical, or mentally?
Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about when I said expanding love real quick. So how things like that have transferred over into my life is now my ability when I talk and I negotiate people, specifically when it comes to like business type things or for example, in the EDM scene, specifically when you're doing events and stuff, it's a very competitive environment. So before I would have gotten that competitive spirit where now it's about competition. Now I'm less about competition, more about cooperation. So why are we going to fight for a spot at the table when we can collaborate and just build a bigger table? So that's how some of those lessons for me will run over. Uh, and I think for self love, I think the biggest thing with self-love is honoring yourself, right? I think it's bigger than self-love. For me, my wife taught me how to love myself, and I'm absolutely grateful. We ever eternally grateful for that. But she also taught me something else that was more valuable than love, and that's self-respect. So there was a point in time where she had expectations of me as a man, and I wasn't meeting those expectations because of I was all these negative things. But she was my catalyst, the wake up call that said, "Hey, listen, you're not meeting my expectations. I know you have the capacity and capability. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do so. But if you don't meet my expectations, I'm going to leave and find somebody else who will." I never had anybody talk to me like that. And after I got defensive and was in my feels and had to sit there and look at that from the actual intent, I was like, that comes from a place that's greater than love. And that's self-respect. To say that, no, I love you. Actually, you know what? I take that back. It's not just self-respect. It goes back to what you said, self-love. I love you so much, but not more than I love myself. So I think you have to honor yourself at all times like that, because then if you don't, you're doing a disservice to you and you're doing a disservice to the relationship. Because I think there's other things that we can't see, that friction or static, right? And when you talk about things about frequency and connection, right? Energy doesn't lie. We know about frequencies, we know about radio waves and things like that. And what gets in the way of that is static, right? So when you have static there, you might be able to hear the music, but you hear like it distorted, versus when you eliminate that static and you get that nice, clear, crisp. And I think by not honoring yourself or speaking your truth, I think you're injecting static into your relationship and your life.
And how do you do that on the daily basis whenever you experience uncomfortable feelings?
I think you have to first, you have to acknowledge them, right? Acknowledge your feelings, and you have to feel your feelings, right? You have to. I think if you don't, I experienced the don't, and the experience, the don't manifests itself into a 255-pound Rob who drinks a bottle of Jameson every 2 days, who's on 12 medications, is not emotionally grounded by any means. That's how that stuff manifests, right? It wasn't the cause, but it was a huge cause of that. Because it wasn't grounded, myself. So you have to be solid first. That makes sense.
It does in your way, right? And then how does that look to be solid first?
Stable. So when I talked about my ability of being stable, I think that's what my ground is. That's what my foundation is. I said physically fit, mentally sound, emotionally grounded, spiritually aware, and socially conscious. That's my foundation for stability, solid, and whatever deviation or word we have for that. Because if any one of those are off, there's going to be some issues that are there. But how do you? Well, your question was right. How do you get back to there? So I think the first part is that you acknowledge it, and then you feel it, and then after you feel it, then you have to process that information, and what do you have to do with it? Some people have different ways of doing it, sitting in solitude and things like that. I found it best. I have my own little foundation where it's just, physical fitness, nutrition, cognitive conditioning, what you put in your head and your environment. So I kind of keep that as my framework also as I'm, processing those types of things. And then at the end of that, you come to, like I said, once you get to, processing, come with a determination on what are you going to decide, based upon that information.
Beautiful. Thank you. I also remember you mentioned about that you process emotions quickly. How do you feel that you stated enough time with that uncomfortable emotion to let it that go or to just process that quickly?
So actually, I have to thank you because I never thought of that until you brought that to my attention. And it very quickly, it signaled to a behavior of mine, something I found very interesting when it comes to special operators. As I'm working with these guys, it started with high performers in that world. There's like commonalities between them. And the two things they had was, one was a significant or a high amount of childhood trauma, and high ADHD behavior. The childhood trauma, in the surface, you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But if you have someone who has high childhood trauma but can function at that level, that means that person has a lot of resilience. The other thing is the ADHD behavior, which is the ability to get information very quickly and process it. So a lot of former special operators have ADHD or are high, would be considered very high on that because they're able to process information very quickly. The problem with that is that becomes our commonplace, and you do that all the time when you have the time to do that. So you said something and I still have to ask myself that. I haven't finished that question is, have you sat enough time to process emotions, or have you just gone to what your normal baseline is, which is here, I get it, process it, okay, move on to the next objective. That's my old life still coming in. And thank you also, because that also highlighted something when we were on the boat. Remember very quickly, I think it was like the first day where like really hung out, and you were just very, forward. And you're like, "Hey, I know what your issue is." And I'm like, "Who are you, man?" Remember, I was like, "This Brazilian witch is over here telling me I'm reading you." I'm like, maybe I made a real bad decision here. But you said something that was but you did say something was very insightful, and it was very impactful, and I have to thank you for that. And you said what's hold that you are holding on and you're not releasing. You already said you're not releasing what's holding you back. And I was like, man, what is that? Because I was at a point of where I have the context, the ability, and all of these things to start building success. But why am I not moving at the rate that I want to? And a lot of it did have to do with what you talked about, releasing what's holding you back. The very interesting thing about that was I couldn't understand the concept fully, because in my mind I was like, I don't know what the hell Amanda's talking about, because the old me is gone. Like, she got to see the new version of me. This is the new Rob. This is not the old Rob. But I was thinking about it from a negative perspective. But guess what else I'm not, Amanda? I'm also not a special forces commander of a special operations attachment with 12 absolute subject matter experts who build. I mean, they're the reason why all the officers in detachment and commands who are successful. You have these individuals that it's almost impossible to fail. It really is. It's that level of high performing individuals, and you get very comfortable with. As a me, I'm like, you need a vision, you need a a commander's intent. Like, I can give you the left and rights and do all that, and then hand that over to my guys who build the routes from the start point to the end point. While I'm out there just politicking and finding resources, doing all these things, I'm very comfortable with that. But I'm not comfortable with all the backside support, because I haven't done that. And then when you told me, hey, you are not releasing what's holding you back, I realized, like, that was what was really holding me back. It wasn't the negative stuff. I've overcome that years ago. It was that holding on to that identity, that framework of who I am. It's like, bro, you're not that anymore. But you're just a dude now. Yeah, you're just a dude that takes out the trash and picks up dog shit and makes sure the trash is out on Tuesday, bro. That's who you are now. And I think sometimes that's a severe fracture for a lot of guys. It's like a narcissistic or an ego fracture. I've seen it all the time. And a lot of vets, it comes out in like this sense of entitlement, and it varies for everybody. But mine was like, have to listen to this overweight guy at Walmart give me lip. And I'm like, dude, just a very interesting understanding once you start becoming aware of those things. The amazing part about it, which is what I would say, if whatever I was blessed with, I have some guys who are former teammates of mine who are like, I don't know why God delivered you in this way, but gave you a gift that you're wasting. And that's what really convicted me to start putting more emphasis in it. Because for whatever reason, I've been able to understand, become aware of those things, but then able to articulate them back. And it wasn't for anything noble. It was just for myself to, garner lessons learned. But then when other people come and they're struggling, you want to give them help. And I think that's also where you and I connected, right? Because you have shared the same passion. Like, when you're like, I'm a coach, I was like, this is absolutely crazy, right? We did not talk about anything like that, but we share the same passion of, like, you and I both, where we're passionate doesn't come from a book. It doesn't come from some, like, I put in Chat GPT, what is it to be an intimacy coach? No, both of our programs are built on real world situations based upon our experience that we just reverse engineered. And we're telling people, like, hey, listen, I don't have all the answers. I don't. I absolutely don't. However, I figured out some stuff on my experiences that I would love to share with you. And hopefully you'll learn something from my mistakes. And maybe, you know what, you'll say something to me and I'll learn something from you. And hopefully, like, I always want to be challenged on my truth. So I'd be like, 'cause again, that expansion part, every time something happens, I'm like, man, like, when does this stop? And to your point at the very beginning of the show, it doesn't stop, I think, until we're dead. Like, it's a never ending, you know? Um,
Really.
but I will tell you this. They did a survey of like 95-year-olds in the United States, and overwhelming average came back that the one regret they had was not taking more risks. And I think regret comes in many forms, but the thing that I always wanted to be worried about was being like that old 90-something-year-old man in a bed shriveled up and sitting there like, man, I wish I would have took more risks. I wish I would have lived life. I wish I would have had more experiences. Because I think at the end of the day, that's all we have, right? We have our experiences. What are experiences? They're just moments, just a bunch of moments captured together and put into one. And I think not honoring your truth, not exploring yourself, your human experience, I think you run the risk of being one of those old people sitting in a chair with now they are physically and mentally unable to do any of the stuff that they're like, I do everything to take that risk right now. So anyway, that's
And
something that's
for those peoples, it's okay because that's their own choice. Because everything comes to the point like self awareness, and then I'm able to choose a new
yeah,
path.
that's how I disassociate. So if I give somebody and I share with them and they're like, "Hey, Rob, fuck you," I'm indifferent to it because there's somebody out there that's gonna land on. And for me, what I got over what a lot of people talk about, like imposter syndrome. Who am I to tell anybody anything? Again, going back to me taking concepts I know from my former life, we have this thing called lessons learned. If I go to a school, if I go to a combat zone, if I experience something, I bring that information back and I share it with my team in order to make them more operationally effective, right? I wouldn't hesitate to do that. So why the hell would I not do that in my personal life? Why would I want to share with somebody, hey, listen, I'm not telling you to go down the road. If you want to go down the road, go ahead. But I'm telling you, if you go 500 meters down the road, there's a bridge and it's out. Some people need to go down there because that's their journey. Hey, go do it. They got to go down there to see that the journey that the bridge is down, and they're gonna walk back. And then there's some who are like, "Hey, Amanda, I appreciate it." And guess what they just did? They just saved themselves that having to walk their ass all the way down there to see the bridge, assess it, and then walk their ass all the way back. And I think that's why a lot of us really admire young people who adhere to the wisdom of really smart people. Because if you think about that recycled learning, if you're a young person, if I were telling a young person anything like, go study somebody who is really smart in a field that you want, because you literally can just like save yourself 20 to 30 years, you know? So
Yeah. And to continue, and thank you, Rob, for sharing all of your knowledge and all of the experience that you've been having, and just to inspire all of us.
thank you for keeping me on track, Amanda.
Yes. Well, let's get because we have a few other questions, so this way we can
Okay.
just keeping the
All
track
right.
on it.
All
So,
right.
where do you feel most connected, emotionally, physically, or mentally?
So this is a very interesting one because my love language was physical touch. I love to dance, right? That's weird, right? You never think it. Um, but my most connection with intimacy is mental. And I think why that is, and again, this is just my opinion. I think at the core of masculinity when it comes to his choosing of a mate, specifically if he's heterosexual, is looking for somebody that scares them a little bit, right? They're a little bit adventurous, but most
It is
importantly, that are
spice.
yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Gonna challenge you, right? Because when someone challenges you, that promotes growth. And then you can start looking at things much differently because you understand the intent, right? So if you go into a place of where I always say, right, man, I love your feminine wisdom. If you give me a new truth or you correct me, right? I told you, I was like, I may not like it, right? Nobody likes to be told something that makes them uncomfortable, especially when it's true. But I said, there's one thing I said, I will always respect it and I will always honor it because I know that when you give things like that, it's from a place of love. It's not from a place of I'm trying to be this overbearing woman who's telling you that you're all jacked up. So that makes because there's trust there, right? And that safety that allows the other person to take that information and actually digest it for the way that it intended to, so that way you can give a more appropriate response. Yeah,
So then it's more on the mental lab aspects, and how does that goes like in the order? It would be like mental, emotionally, and then physical.
yeah, oh, absolutely, in that order. Physical for me has been always the last, and you know why? I think that is. because sex for me was like I was very hypersexual, and you have to figure out where it's coming from. A lot of it's validation from women. Why do you need validation from women? Well, I didn't grow up with a good mother in my life, so I didn't develop that nurturing or that emotional attachment. Your mother's supposed to be the first woman that you love, so you're chasing all of this, uh, like pretty much like all this nurturing and stuff that you didn't get when you were like when you were a
Yeah.
kid. Makes
It
God.
does. It's just the same, like from my own experience and some clients of mine. It's just like in a father space, right? So I did not have my father. So looking for security was a projection on the partners, right?
Right.
So then I have to shift that because if that person, if I'm not feeling safe with myself, I'm not going to allow space to find a person that who is feeling safe with themselves.
So for me, overcoming that sexual impulsion was like the last thing on my list of like, okay, I achieved what I try to do when I help other men is achieve a place of not abstinence because that's impossible. We live in a world where everything is around you, but get into a place of control of where the things that very vices and pleasures and things that used to absolutely destroy and control my life have absolutely zero impact. And if there was one thing that I could say I could give to somebody, it would be that because that's a level of self respect. And then with that, it allowed me to develop my intimacy with women much different. I was open more to understanding about feminine energy, about feminine essence, about feminine wisdom. And not just that, but learning why I would have a attraction to a woman. And the first time it ever happened where I could say my evolution of masculinity changed, I was at the Ritz, which is the local venue in Tampa for EDM. And there was this girl, she was underage because she had an X on her hand. But I remember just being like drawn to her. And it really had this weird thing because she looked really young. And I was like, I don't have a sexual attraction to her. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Lo and behold, again, I don't believe in coincidence. I go to get water by myself and here she is sitting at a table by herself. So again, like normal rave culture, right? You get a gift or something. And so I said, hey, would you like a bottle of water? And she said, I would love one. So I gave her a bottle of water and I said, hey, can I just give you a compliment? Just, I said, I'm not trying to hit on you. This is just an older guy who's been around and want to give you something that I appreciate, some qualities you have. It's just absolutely. And it's the same qualities that I was telling you about that I found attractive in you. She just had a good presentation. She carried herself very well. She just walked with, confidence, with good posture and seemed really poised. And so I just wanted to honor those traits in her. I said, hey, do me one favor. I said, do not lose that because that's going to separate you from all the other women that are around you. And I went to walk off and she said, hey, can I give you a hug? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You know, that raves, it's really common in that. But for me, that felt so good because it was finally I've achieved something that I didn't know that I needed, that I wanted. But that was an absolute space where the women in my circle can feel absolutely safe because I
Mhm.
can view the women in myself like not in a sexual manner. It was
Totally.
honoring them in a different way. And when they felt that safety, something absolutely amazing happened. I started getting just bombarded with all of this like feminine love that I wasn't used to. And there's a dichotomy of man, which in a book called The Way of Men, Jack Donovan talks about being good at being a man and being a good man. And I will say unequivocally, the thing that balanced me out between being good at being a man and being a good man is being around good feminine energy. But that makes perfect sense with everything that we know. We talk about the dance, the yin and the yang. You can't be overbalanced. Now there is um areas that hyper masculinity is absolutely imperative. I've seen it in combat sports. I've seen it in law enforcement. I've seen it in military war, and I've seen it in prison. But that is an unbalanced environment. In an environment like we live here, you have to have the polarity in order for things to not just be balanced. Because what does balance mean? Mean harmony. And I think when you have that perfect dance and that flow, there's just this level of experience of harmony that is like, I could right now, like an asteroid can hit the earth and I will leave fulfilled because I got to experience what true harmony is in the polarity with the masculine and feminine. And I think that's something that everybody gets to experience. So I consider myself extremely blessed.
I agree with you. Thank you. Thank you. The next one, it's going to be, do you feel this dynamic has ever been used consciously or unconsciously to avoid deeper emotional work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. It goes back to everything in life comes to intent, right? Are people choosing this from a state of growth, or a state of like a dissatisfaction or a lacking? And it could be, but you have to communicate that. And I think a lot of people confuse the freedom with a lack of structure, and we talked about that earlier with like your framework and stuff like that. But yeah, people use it for their ill intent, right? People use it to have access to multiple partners, or they have some issue inside that they haven't dealt with, and they have some misconstrued understanding that if they add another human being into their dynamic that is already flawed, that somehow it's going to work itself out. Like that is, I don't know. I think maybe now, and I laugh because that would have easily been me a few years ago. Now I look at that like absolute, that's like relationship suicide, like that you're just setting everybody up for failure. I don't know. Did that answer that question? Sometimes like, me, I go off on some tangents.
You did, but I can see like it comes from the point like unconsciously looking for that dynamic. And once you become self aware about your, I'm not saying you, I'm saying
Yeah.
in the church, right? Whenever you become self aware about the limitations, and then you can expand on that, and then you can reframe and shift and make a new choices. But once and again, it's
Oh
about the
yeah.
communication.
No, so your unconsciously comes, I think, through your experience sometimes too, right? Because once it's seen, it's not unseen. Once you know that you can develop a relationship, an intimate emotional attachment, even love for multiple people, that you can't just unsee that, right? Because you don't know who you're going to cross paths with, and you might want to explore that individual. It doesn't have to be in a sexual manner, right? Like we spent all groove cruise together. We didn't have intercourse at all, but it was the first time in my life I ever experienced like true intimacy with a woman without the sexual experience. I never thought that I could achieve something like that. And that was an absolutely amazing experience. I mean, it was so impactful. We're having this conversation today, right?
Yeah,
But I
totally.
would have never been able to experience that if we weren't open to it. You and I both talked about like some significant personal growth that came from that, right? Like, so for me, I felt like I just like first, it was understanding the ability to articulate to women the characteristics that I find attractive in them without hypersexualizing them. And then it moved on to understanding that I can have an intimate experience with a female and not be sexually active with them.
Mhm.
And that again, it was just a level of intimacy that I remember one time you said, "Hey, how are you feeling?" And I was like, I couldn't think of the word, and I said, "I feel fulfilled." Yeah. It was a great experience, and I got to share it with you, so it was awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would say thank you too, because there was common ground. I did had experience a very unique connection that 40 years of my life I never had it before. Definitely the growth came and is still unfolding, and I'm very grateful for it. Even I've been interfacing some of the deepest fear ever
Nice.
because got triggered, and I'm grateful for that. And at the same time, I'm able to work other layers of my self-awareness, which is being very rewarding and very, very free, that
Yeah.
I never couldn't imagine. So, and then being this space and share this time with you and expand that for others, it's beautiful. And not having like, oh, I'm afraid about what others will judge.
Yeah.
No, no,
I
because
can
I feel safe in my own skin.
yeah.
I feel I know who I am. I'm just being,
So
and that's
I've also I had to learn how to define success. How do you define success? Not just for me personally, but because I work in the space of coaching others. how do I find a definition of success that I think is tailorable to the people or at least the population that I talk to? And where I came to that understanding is I took Tay and her girlfriend to a yacht party and in Miami, $134 million yacht. And I got close with the individual who was there, and he was telling me by the time he was 40 years old, he had acquired so many businesses and was a multimillionaire over that he had all these things. He's like, but my wife doesn't respect me, my kids hate me, and I don't even know if my friends are truly friends. So I have to continue to work this hard in order to keep up this facade. And I was like, holy shit. So a lot of things came to fruition for me. And one was, money. Money is a metric, not the metric, right? So again, I had to go back. What is success? So Rob Bailey defines success as creating a lifestyle that allows you to live your most authentic and genuine self while increasing personal fulfillment and decreasing self-induced friction. And I think because I first was chasing happiness, I think happiness is impossible. It's a fleeting moment. So for me, it went from I want to be happy to I'm being fulfilled. I think that's why it was so powerful when I said it at that time, because that was like the first time I was like, I felt truly fulfilled as an individual all around. And then self-induced friction, because we all have it, whether it's finances, relationship, health, right? We have things that we do or don't do that inject negative consequences in our life. So when I first start working with individuals, I focus on the self-induced friction because that's the easiest to eliminate, and then we can address other things. And the reason I do that is because life's going to throw enough stuff at you. You don't need to help life kick your ass. Life's going to kick your ass on its own. So if you can eliminate as much of the self-induced friction, you'll be better prepared, in my opinion, to take on the brunt of that. But I think you have to endure some of those pains, because there's lessons on the side of pains, and most of those lessons come in the form of resilience. Because you just, unfortunately, you gotta feel things to or go through things in order to experience them. Both,
Unfortunately.
yeah, positive and negative. Right? So
But it's once and again, it's us giving a meaning. That's why, because you say unfortunately, and I say that's fortunately, just to get to the
mhm.
center of it, because it's what we need in order to grow. Where do you notice discomfort that is still hasn't been fully addressed?
Discomfort fully addressed in what, to myself or to my partner? Like, who are you talking about?
On the emotional work, because this question comes from the previous one. The previous one we were talking about it. How do you feel this dynamic has ever been used consciously or unconsciously to avoid deeper emotional work, right? So then we have, where do you notice discomfort that is still hasn't been fully addressed? So where do you feel that discomfort that you need to still address it something?
I think going forward is I think that's why I harped on comprehension, is being able to communicate your expectations, but communicate them in a way that are understood by everybody who's involved. Because again, you can run into the possibility of two people operating on different levels of understanding, and those levels of understanding are extremely drastic, and those drastic understanding come with real consequences, right? It's like me shooting a gun and going, you know what, Amanda, I'm so sorry, I accidentally shot you. It's like, yeah, okay, asshole, but you still shot me, so you just have to be, not only, like I said, communicate those expectations, but have expectations that, it's difficult enough to have a relationship with two people, right? We're complex beings. We are absolutely, um, that's what makes us amazing, right? Now you're adding another individual or individuals, right? Now, if you're adding a third, it's going to change the dynamic, whether it's a man or a woman, right? Because you're going to have more masculine energy or more feminine energy. And sometimes that can disrupt the balance of, your household. And then you start experiencing real emotions, but you're already vested, right? Like, what do you do then? Do you ride it out and see what happens in this current relationship, or do you leave, or do you just go, I don't know. Once this is over with and wherever this ends, I just know I don't want to explore this dynamic again. I don't know. It varies for everybody. I think that goes back to why you and I connect very well, because we're very analytical. We're like, okay, I understand, but what are the second and third order effects of this? And so that's why
But
a lot of the things I talk about, some of them aren't from my experiences, some are from my witness experiences, but some are just from an understanding. Like for me, no one had to tell me, hey, Rob, if you inject another human being into your relationship, it's going to be more complex. It's not going to like fill in gaps. So I wasn't like I didn't have this weird idea that I wasn't moving in a something that wasn't steeped in reality, if that makes sense.
It does. It's just like once and again, things happen and we cannot control, and we go to an uncertain field. And so how to navigate it on that uncertain field, that's why the question, it was just like the discomfort that is still hasn't not been fully
Yeah,
addressed. It is, and then we got back to the link of before, like how much enough time I'm sitting with the discomfort.
yeah,
Because even moving quickly and fast, because it was the way of the old self, right? So let's say that. And then whenever you mention about ADHD, I can see myself in a spectrum. So totally understand that. And that is the reason that nowadays I'm able to sit enough time with
I just made you think about every time we're going, like in the rave scene, you always are always messing with people. Like you can't. That's the ADHD. Like you see like something shiny or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's like
totally.
Amanda. Yeah, you need
And
one of
and I
those, like the kid leashes. You know the kid leashes, or tie a balloon to you so when you run in the crowd, people can find you. You're not hard to miss. You just go where all the parties at, and you'll find Amanda in the middle somewhere having a good time.
yes,
The
totally.
spirit of Brazil. It's the spirit of Brazil.
But well, not everybody has that spirit. To just
No,
like I can just say like, oh, it's just like it's a American Rob spirit, because it's unique to us, right? We
yeah,
all have that. So, but not.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so for me, it is just like it was quick to move, like, and to disconnect and to dissociate from my body, because the ADHD has that capacity of like disconnected. And then I never went to the doctor to diagnose myself that I
right,
have ADHD. I did not need it because I have so much self awareness that I was able to acknowledge the neurodivergency traits and how I couldn't just improve nutrition and everything. So
yeah,
it's not gonna be in the place in here, but
yeah,
I was able to sit full enough time to process all of my childhood, and it's still processing all of my childhood traumas. So then it's that kind of scenario, which is just like it's discomfort, but I'm
yeah,
choosing to sit with that because that gives me freedom. And I can agree with you. Yeah, we are connected. We have that dynamic, like mentally, because we enjoy stimulation, intellectual stimulation, and then that's the why we can exchange a lot. And so because that is their kind of a stimulation, but also whenever we are interfacing in the dynamic of the relationship, it's going to change, it's going to shift and come back in like how to address that. Do believe that can, and from my perspective, I did not have any of this dynamic. And so it is different. And then just like coming back again, what I am open to experience, but how I can ownership the consequence, how I can detach.
mhm,
And so the detachment from my perspective comes from the acceptance of it, and experiencing that, so then I can detach and then I can feel free of that any dynamic, because like we're saying, it's not presenting only in relationship, it's everything in life, like the food. How can I be detached of the cookies that I love?
yeah.
That kind of thing. And so that gave us the next one, which is what it is something about this lifestyle that people don't talk about enough.
Um, there's multiple things. So I think the first one is they think non-monogamy doesn't really create problems from my perspective. I think it reveals them. And meaning if you have some deep rooted insecurities or fears or whatever it is, or communication problem, whatever it is, um, you're gonna it's gonna highlight those. The other thing is like agreement doesn't mean really alignment, but you have to figure out like what does it look like, right? And the reason why I say alignment doesn't eat equality, and vice versa, is this. I had to learn very quickly is I use the analogy of cups, and this is how I would frame it to anybody who was interested in exploring something like this. Is you have to look at everybody has cups, and there's a certain thing that fills your cups, right? So maybe I'm a 3, maybe you're an 8, maybe my wife is a 6, right? For me, I don't care about the equal distribution. More than I care about is everybody's cups being filled. And I think when you start look at it from that perspective, then you can start seeing, where the balance is in relationships like that and where the unbalance is at. And that's usually when somebody's not getting their cup filled, right? But here's the thing about that, right? What will end up happening is if you had, say, a dynamic of a third, which they, call like a throuple, the person who's being grieved usually just wants to blame the other person, like they're the ones that injected this friction into their life. But that's not necessarily true because the absolute same issues that plague monogamous couples plague non-monogamous couples. Why? Because it doesn't matter the structure, it's about the people that are in there. And whenever you have people, right, there's human behavior. I've been all over the world, regardless of, age, religion, culture, language, geographical area. Humans are humans, right? Human behavior is human behavior. I don't even care about religious frameworks, right? So there's some predictability that we have just upon. I mean, you don't have to keep your point. You don't have to tell me. I can observe this with my eyes by just looking around.
Yeah, thank you for that. I do believe so. What do you mean? Like what people don't know about the lifestyle?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple, right? So the first one, right, non-monogamy, it doesn't create problems. It often reveals them. The other one, I said agreement doesn't equal alignment. And then you said 3, so I'll give you those first 2 for free, and I'll give you the other ones. The other one is like you can't outsource your insecurity and call it a boundary. And I think that's where we were kind of talking earlier when I said you have to communicate an expectation. But I think to your point, you have to make sure that the expectation is rooted in love and good fortune versus insecurity, because that can cause some serious issues. The other one is like if somebody feels like an option, then the structure that you have is already broken. And that kind of goes back to what I was referring to is that everybody's cup's not full, then there's going to be an unbalance. But if I were to say, what is the number one thing to take away from exploring a non-monogamous relationship is without a doubt expectation management. More partners equals more complexity, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna equal more connection. And that's just something again, expectation management. Now, for me, putting my old hat on as a commander, we lived in expectation management when it came to risk. I'm okay with assuming risk, absolutely, but I need to know what risk I'm assuming, because in my former one, you had to write your name next to that risk, and now you are assuming responsibility with that risk. So again, I'm okay with assuming the risk if I know what I'm getting into. And I think that's where the expectation management come into play. They don't have to be communicated because we talked about, you see it with human behavior. There's an expectation that, people are going to connect the way that they're going to connect on different levels. And if you're not willing to see that or participate that, then why would you even get into this to begin with? It's not right for you. And you're doing yourself a disservice. Now, the people I feel for are the ones that don't have the open relationship, or not open, because that's a words mean things, right? And I didn't mean it in an open relationship where you can just explore. What I meant open is that it was safe enough for the two people to speak their uncomfortable truths to the other one in order to figure out some things together as individuals. But imagine if you had a desire to be non-monogamous and your partner did not. That could cause some serious issues, and kind of goes back to the one of the questions we were asking, like, well, what do you do with that information, right? One of you have to compromise and give up something. Are you willing to do that as that individual who gives it up, or are you willing to walk away? I don't think there's good or a bad. What I do know is indecision kills, literally in my previous life. But the other thing, I think it was Gary Vee who said it. They were talking about decisions, and he said, I don't even consider the other decision because I'll never know the outcome, the other half of that decision. And I thought that was like a really brilliant way to disassociate. Why am I going to entertain a hypothetical? No, I made this decision. I'm in this. This is my world. I'm fully vested. I'm fully present. And that kind of impacted me on making decisions, not fully implemented, but enough impact to where it's questioning my current reference point to decision making. And then looking back again at my like historical record of experience of seeing individuals who were high performers in my field that I admired and think that were decisive and assertive leaders. And all of them had one quality, and that was their ability to be decisive. Not necessarily when you think decisive, you think hurried, you think quick. Sometimes being decisive is what I learned later, right? Is having tactical patience, letting what we call the battlefield develop, live a little, see what happens. And then you get to a point where you have enough information and data that now you can make not just a decisive, you can make a more precision decision. But again, right, there's a lot of context, right? The
But
the time might not allow you to do that, right? So you have to be an individual who can react quickly and someone who can be patient. But that's when experience comes along, right? Whether it's your own or you read it and learn it from somebody else, it's through that experience you learn something that's what wise is being discerned. You have discernment, right? Being able to take in information and make a decision based upon what you know. And that's not a risk. That's not a gamble. That's a calculated risk. That's a difference. Going back to
yeah,
understanding. That
no, I was just saying, yeah, I can see that, but like we are talking about relationships and intimacy, they are not predictable. We are talking about human beings and emotional beings that to the point that we can sign up for a task sometimes, and we don't know what, and we don't know what's going to happen, right? And then we have the framework before, and then the projection, and then you talk about Gary Vee. He's a phenomenal like
yeah,
entrepreneur, very appreciate him. But also,
yeah.
I see a few patterns that I think is too much pressure. And
You know,
from my
real
own
quick,
experience,
Amanda, I want to inject, the same trait that I find admirable in Gary Vee, I find that in you. And that he's made his money. He doesn't need to get on there and share that with any of us. That's something he earned through his life experience, right? He has a choice to share it or not. And guess why? Because he earned it. But he wants to give back to others, right? Because things that he learned, like, hey, I learned this really cool technique. Let me teach it with you and hope you that you'll learn something from it, right? I share that same thing with you where you're like, hey, I've learned some things along my way and I want to share that thing with them. So it's admirable. So like I said, I admire you for the same things I admire Gary Vee for.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, he's very
Yeah.
good. What inner work has been required to sustain this kind of relationship?
Inner work, you have to really examine what you define, like for me, how you define masculinity, right? And where's the line with you? And then also dealing with emotions and insecurities and things like that. So like I at some point was feeling really jealous and insecure. And I'm like, where's that coming from? And I had to really look at a lot of childhood root issues of feeling like being abandoned, maternal abandonment. So I experienced something similar to you, but it was on the maternal side, not the paternal side. So there was a level of understanding, or at least connection at that level, just knowing it from a different angle. So I really had to address that. And going back to what we talked about earlier of being able to communicate, I could have saved myself some heartache if I would have just communicated early and said, hey, listen, I'm feeling this kind of way. One, she could have reassured me, or two, what ended up happening later on in the day or later on down the road, excuse me, was that what I was feeling and thinking was didn't match the reality and the truth. So I was like holding on to this for a long time until it kind of festered into something. That whole time it festered into something that it didn't need to. It was preventable. So those are like some of like again like the lessons learned that you have to share with people. But for me, that was the inner work that I had to do.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, to keep any kind of transformation sustainable, at least for me, it was my experience, right? I have to sit with those uncomfortable feelings of feeling abandoned and rejected. So this way I couldn't transform uh, the, 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 the spectrum, the emotional spectrum, the energy. And I love Carl Jung, and I apply a lot of his work in my work.
And you and I are on that too. We like his philosophy because I think anyway,
Yes.
we could talk about that forever too.
What we resist we persist, and what we allow we transform. So it's on that. And we have, okay, that one, what are you still learning or working through right now?
What am I learning right now? I think I'm on my final lap of getting to a point of, I guess, like self validation, self love, self respect, where I truly don't require the validation of anybody external. I've never felt that before. One thing I have come to learn, right? You can understand things, but still not really truly understand them. You can know them conceptually, but until you experience them and feel them. Like, perfect example, right? I could share with a young man who's of age, like what it's like to be with a woman. I can explain to him to the blue in the face. He can understand that, but until he feels the warmth of a woman, he's never going to truly fully experience that. So sometimes you just, life is its best experience, or its greatest teacher.
Beautiful. Thank you. And do you think people sometimes romanticize this lifestyle? Why and what not?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about it earlier, right? I was making a joke about everybody wants two women until they have two women, right? It's amazing when it's amazing, and it's not when it's not. So again, I just used the example of, imagine if you were a male with a wife and a girlfriend, and they were both mad at you at the same time. Now, amplify this. Imagine if they were mad at you about the same reason. Now it's like a combat multiplier, like you have double the bombardment. So again, I think that's part of the expectation management. Like we're laughing about it because it's funny, but here's the reality. There's friction in every relationship. So you're going to have to work through it, right? So you can look at whatever relationship that you idolize and be like, you know what? Man, they have it amazing. That's, what I admire. Yeah, you may admire. What are you really admiring? Are you admiring their traits and their characteristics and the things that got them through all of the stuff that you may have no idea what they had
Hmm.
to overcome as not just individuals, but as a couple to get to a place of where they're both individually solid in a place where they don't need each other's validation and look over at the other person and say, I choose you not because I need you, because you're a fucking cool person and I'd like to go on this journey of life with. I think that's a different level of love that most people never experience. And I think that's kind of that's sad, when it comes to the human experience, right? Because we only have one. The reality is we're all going to die. That's a hard truth that most people
And
don't
pay
want to.
taxes. And pay
What's that?
taxes.
Yeah, 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 for real, right? Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's good.
Just pass
That, that's
by the
but
April
that.
15.
So the reason why that's so funny too is because that's not a saying that's in Brazil, right? That's something you learned when you come to the States, or do they say that too? The only thing is death and taxes. Is that a Brazilian thing as well?
No, not at
Okay.
all.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure because it was funny, right? And you picked up on that.
So then you say that you don't romanticize the this type of lifestyle. It's not romanticized.
Do I romanticize about it?
No, it was just like, do you think people
Oh,
sometimes
absolutely.
romanticize? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I don't care who you are, right? If you are a whatever, if you're a male or a female and you had like a boyfriend and a husband, right? And you both getting equally like spoiled by both of them, or a guy who has a girlfriend and a wife, right? Or if you had a female who was bisexual and she wanted a girlfriend and a husband, didn't want to miss out on that experience, right? I mean, that's a part of the human experience that somebody could engage in, right? But again, that goes back to what is the intent? Are you romanticizing about it as like a fantasy type thing, or is it something because in your spirit you feel that you have the capacity to love more than one person? Or like the example I just used, you want to experience the feminine and the masculine, and you don't have to give either one up. And the reality is, You don't. I mean,
Hmm.
and I know it sounds crazy, but and this is just in life. And again, I'm not promoting any type of lifestyle. I'm just talking about from my experience. But one thing I've learned, and this goes across the board of the spectrum of things, that the solutions to our problems are simple. The problem is we equate ease with simplicity when some of the most difficult things to do are simple, right? Eat right, take my vitamins, hydrate, work out, don't be an asshole. Those are very simple, but they're extremely difficult. And I think we have a tendency, because I know I do, and I know some of the guys that I talk to, they're like, yeah, it relates to me, is we overcomplicate things when sometimes it's just the simple, right? Like a no, why do I have to? Or as simple as I don't have to explain myself. And I think that comes a level of self awareness, of self love, and power that just gives you this self assurance and this grounding that is like it's a really powerful feeling as an individual. That to the point where you and I want to share with other people. Like I want you to experience some of the things that I've experienced because they've been extremely impactful and have added value to my human experience. I want you to add value to your human experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like, here am I, experienced this, so this was it. So now do what you want it. you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
more like expanding the framework because I I found fascinated how we can evolve as a
yeah.
human and through experiences, right? So, but once and again, what is good for me, it's not good for others,
Right.
and what
But
is
you
good for
said
others.
something really, really key. You said you have to make a decision, right? And it is that simple. You basically said, well, I just said, you know what? I just choose this and I'm going to do this. And it's that simple. When people are like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, it's like, no, it is that simple. You just gotta, I know it sounds so oversimplified, but it is that simple.
What would you say to someone considering this path of like non-monogamy?
The first thing I would say is you need to ensure that you absolutely know yourself, right? Again, and we talked about earlier, if you don't know yourself, how are you going to communicate your truths accurately? Because you don't know. However, I think you can acknowledge that and say, for example, hey, I'm willing to explore this, but I don't know what I'm going to do with a jealous feeling. So maybe you talk about those types of things before they actually happen. And again, people say it sounds really crazy because in my prior life, I told you that's how we did. I didn't go on an operation without doing a map recon or, walking it out or having the what ifs or what are the second and third order effects of this and how do we mitigate that? Because you want to go into an environment having as much information as possible. And the only way you can obtain that is by turning assumptions into facts or at least having a contingency plan in place when you hit that. So when you experience that, it's not your first time. You can react a little bit differently. So for me, having those conversations of those potential second and third order effects or things that can be of concern for you, you should address them prior to because there may be something that you're like, I'm absolutely not okay with that. So why would you go put yourself in a situation to set yourself up for failure? That's like, I'm not going to plan for mission failure. I plan for mission success. I need to define that real quick. So when I say failure, so this goes back to my conversation about communication and comprehension, right? Because mission failure, I used that's a military term that I'm familiar with. I'm not talking because I absolutely agree with what you're saying, right?
But yeah, so you were saying that failure and feedback. What
Yeah,
is the
so
difference?
I absolutely agree with what you're saying because we have a thing like that we call an after action review. And that's an objective look at you look at what happened, what didn't happen, and why did it happen. And then you go into what you call like, like pros and cons, like what are your sustains, what you like about it, what you didn't like about it. And so then that's the backfeed process for it. So I just use a term that I'm familiar with, although it means
Mhm.
something completely different, but I agree with you. Does that make sense? So for you, failure is like I'm labeling something in my aspect would be a negative overtone when I could look at it from a more objective and positive overtone as it's just life experience and data. It's feedback. So if I say, hey, I want to try non-monogamy, I go and I'm like, whoa, you know what? I really don't like that. But that's okay from your standpoint, which I absolutely agree is you're not holding yourself, beating yourself up over it. You're like, hey, I wanted to experience life. I did. I'm grateful for that experience, but it's just not for me. And what allowed me to do that was taking individuals to EDM festivals because it's not everybody's thing. I have not yet, which has been absolutely amazing, but I'm eventually going to run into someone who's going to be like, Rob, you know, I really appreciate what you're doing. I am so happy that you've found something for you and other people, but I appreciate this experience, but this is just not for me. And going over that in my head is allowed me to, disassociate from those types of feelings. But the same way with non-monogamy, if I walked away from it, I wouldn't be like, "Oh my God, Rob, you did X, Y, and Z." I just like, yeah, I experienced some good and bad in my human experience. I know from that feedback what I do like, what I don't like, what I'm okay with participating in, what my boundaries are, and then also about myself, right? Were my boundaries just me trying to control my partner, like, thinking about stuff like that. So I got an opportunity to learn a lot about myself that I don't think I would have been able to in a conventional dynamic. Because I got to address a lot of things that were deep rooted in me, which actually helped me a lot in my program on multiple levels. But first, understanding masculinity from my perspective and how it shapes. I mean, you've been around me. There's nothing about me that screams that I'm, emasculate or not. So, defining that, but more importantly, was when I went down this rabbit hole of trying to understand masculinity, I had this what you're talking about. Sometimes stuff happens that you have no idea. I went back and had to go look at masculinity again because I found out more about uh, the feminine energy than I did masculinity. To the point where I was picking at some things and I wanted to go back and share with my friends. And I'll share something really quickly because that was like, this is what I say, understanding feminine energy allowed me to understand masculinity better and what my role is, if that makes sense. It's almost like getting intel from the enemy and being able to modify my behavior. And I just use that funny because that's the language that I speak. And it's not saying as you're my enemy. I'm just kind of making a joke about
Yeah,
the the language that I speak.
understand that, but it really is beautiful. It's just for you was more like the feminine energy. In my case, was how to transform the masculine through the feminine, and it's beautiful. And what level of emotional maturity do you believe it's actually required to this type of relationship or to this work? Because we're talking about lifestyle, but it's also work.
So I will say it takes a high degree of emotional intelligence. And I thought about it from it was going to require that because you're bringing in more than one person, right? And so my expectation was you required more of something because it was different. Now, coming full circle, what I realize is that level of emotional stability should be present whether it's a multiple person relationship or a monogamous relationship, because for that polarity to exist, right, especially with the feminine has to feel safe. And I honestly believe that the feminine has to feel safe too, because if the feminine doesn't feel safe, she's not going to do what makes her amazing, right? Nurturing, loving, forgiving, which makes me feel safe. So I have to lead with providing that safety first so I can get from you what I require. And that's where that balance goes, right? Yeah, if I were to say that how my level of maturity of and how I view relationships has come to that point where I think I could love myself better and I can also love somebody else because now I'm actually care enough to want to understand them. So like perfect example. There's one time me and my wife were always coming into like these, we couldn't understand one another's perspective. It didn't matter how you wrote it out, put it into AI, it doesn't matter. Like we're just not seeing eye to eye. And it was causing this friction. And I had this epiphany moment and I was like, what if we are getting upset about something that's a positive? And she's like, here we go again with Robin, some crazy, saying some crazy stuff. And I'm like, no, hear me out. I said, what if by the mere nature um, of you being feminine, you view things differently? And me and my masculine understanding, I view things differently. But if you mirror them together, what I realized is she would see blind spots that I wouldn't see, and I wouldn't see blind spots that she wouldn't see. But when you mirror them up together, you got a more holistic picture of whatever you're dealing with. And that really allowed me to, one, now I'm starting to trust feminine wisdom. And not only am I trusting feminine wisdom, but now I'm going out of my way to seek it because I can articulate it and I can say what it is that I need or what I need you to analyze for me.
And where do you go to get the feminine wisdom?
So, I mean, I got feminine wisdom from you when we hung out, just the women that are in your circle. I mean, that's why, and it could be passerbyers, but usually, again, we're tribalistic by nature. That's why for me, coming from the military of having a special forces detachment to a rave fam is like it's the same but different, just a different label.
And to the last closing question as we are
Mhm.
getting to the end, if you could be radical honest, as you've been,
Yeah.
what has this journey revealed about your relationship with love?
So, like I said, you have to love yourself more than you love the other person. And I think if you're going into a relationship, if you have somebody that loves you more than they love themselves, I think I don't think you're going to experience life in the most fulfilled manner that you could. Because there is a different level of connection, understanding when there are two people who are in that same frequency. And it's just like this constant growth thing. You're not dealing with all of that self-induced friction that I talked about because you've already eliminated it by finding yourself and finding validation in yourself. I'm not looking for it for you, just like you weren't looking for it in me. We are just two human beings that connected and we're like, you're really smart and really weird, and you're really smart and really weird. I want to hang out with you. And it's like, oh, you like to dance and you like to dance. Like it was amazing, an awesome experience, right?
Yes.
Us.
Was it?
Are you blushing, Amanda? Are you blushing a little bit?
I
You're
put on
turning red.
makeup.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Love this. I love this. I love it.
Here's another one of like comfort and growth, right? As we are just
Yeah.
talking about.
All right, come on. Say your questions. I need to make. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you break your professional persona. Hey, by the way, I have to say something. I was so shocked with your opening. It sounded like a recording.
I did, you mean our recording?
No, no, your opening, like, you just flowed through this opening. It kind of I'm not gonna lie, I was a little intimidated at first because we were having, like, just really good, like, you know me, I like it, like, real informal, and you're like, "I'm gonna do the introduction," and then you went to, like, Amanda persona, and I was like, I'm kind of intimidated, and I was like, "I hope I can talk on camera. I don't say some crazy stuff," because now I'm scared. You were, like, in this professional persona, and I was like, "Oh, man." I don't want it anyway. That's why anyway, I was really impressed with that. You were like, man, I hope I can get one of my issues going forward to talk about just fears in general. And all your fears manifest in different aspects of your life. I don't think it just manifests in one area. I think
No, no,
sometimes it's amplified in other areas, but it manifests in every area. But I just have like this a little bit to get over like feeling judged or not, and which that boils down to value, which boils down to like self worth, boils down to am I good enough, which is something I struggled with for a long time in my life, um, which is really wild because I remember one time I was like, man, I lack self confidence. I remember the people I tell were like blown away. They're like, Rob, you used to be, you've been to all these different combat zones and done all this stuff. What the hell you mean you don't have self confidence? And I think the best way you ruin self confidence is just stop doing what you tell yourself you're going to do. You start negotiating, and then after a while, you stop trusting yourself and you lose self confidence. But the amazing part about it is you can build it up. It's a perishable skill, right? So in the adverse, find some confidence targets and start doing some stuff and building yourself back up.
comfort or growth? Do you feel this choice is expanding you or protecting you?
No, expanding me by far, by far.
Beautiful, beautiful. Once and again, thank you so much, Rob,
Yeah,
for being here with us. I
yeah.
really appreciate your time and perspective and to really be honest and open to your life experience, and this way can give people this awareness, this moment for them to expand their own framework. And for all of us, actually, because whenever we are able just to exchange our own experience and come to the place of vulnerability, it's so much power in that. So thank you once and again. And for you who is watching us as right now and would like to connect with our Rob and just ask some questions and just be there and exchanging value with him, please reach out. I'm going to have his links on the bio, and also just to see how he does have the nonprofit organization EDM for that, and so electronic dance and music for veterans. And he's going to be more than glad to connect with you. And once again, thank you so much for being here with us. Bye.
Thanks, Randa.
Welcome.